As one of just the 4 men in the room, I wonder if I can plead insignificance and maybe take us on a slightly different journey, which I hope if you'll bear with me for a couple of minutes. I absolutely spot on agree with Wendy that the purposefulness that women need for defining the way in which you progress your futures is absolutely intrinsic and fundamental. One of my roles for 2 years at KPMG was to look after the diversity portfolio, and in that I became significantly unpopular because I advocated quotas. And I advocated quotas to the irritation of many senior women because the existing systems don't work. And what quotas do, in my limited judgment, is, having also had to address other minority-based concerns myself, is that quotas enforce decision makers to have to take account of those they would otherwise disregard. So if that's an uncomfortable paradigm for you, I apologize, but I won't give up my passion for women's quotas, particularly in the company of women. And I do feel personally that actually some of the greatest disincentives to women's progression are women who've made it and won't allow others to get through. I note the nods because you've all come across them, and I've come across them too, and aren't they horrendous? Let me take you on a slightly different journey for a few minutes and take you back to April the 24th, just a couple of weeks ago, and to a place called Rana Plaza in Dhaka in Bangladesh. A now famous factory collapsed, and in the tragic reminder, says the Washington Post, of a cheap way to get bargain goods, 1,200 mainly women were killed, and 1,800 mainly women were severely and significantly affected permanently, with their lives scarred, as in this case from last week's, this is the Wall Street Journal, the level of amputations of both arms and limbs that has subsequently followed. I've been particularly burdened by this example. Here is another from the International Herald Tribune, US retailers resisting garment deal. You can notice the protester with the shame in the shape of a famous retailer, well known to many, and the multitudes of articles that have appeared from the New York Times to the Economist to the Guardian to the British newspapers galore to the BBC to famous brands who had their production houses in there, such as H&M and Zara and Gap and Primark and Polo and Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger and a multitude of others. What's the issue there? The issue is that women were absolutely, in the most cruel way, discriminated as of no economic long-term value. They were placed at the highest risk possible. When fractures to the building had already appeared, they were told they had to, like slave workers, continue to function in order that we can buy cheap clothes. That's the truth. And when I was campaigning and advocating issues as a commissioner for the Commission for Racial Equality for 9 years here in the UK, I made it a strident point of my own strategy to say to black men and women in the UK, to say to Asian men and women in the UK, you exist in a paradigm of privilege. You have to learn to shift from being those who continuously seek your own progression to those who fight for those who are really on the margins of life. I believe those women in Bangladesh and those women who work in the Philippines and those women who work in the poor garment factories of any part of our world, those are the women who have zero rights. Their very lives were taken for granted in the pursuit of the brand labels that we wear with such ease. And I wonder whether something of the shift of women's responsibility and rights in our modern society should not be instead towards the progression of our own positions, not that that should be disregarded, and I don't disagree with a single thing that has been said so far, and would advocate it absolutely. But if all of the energy that is now focused on women's progression was as equally focused on the women who have no rights to progress, then we would see momentous and critical change. So it will come down to our clothing choices, the extent to which we're prepared to pay for the right of others to be paid decently, whether or not we will actually protest and object and even refuse the brand labels that will not give dignity to disadvantaged women, whether it matters to us enough to hold them to account for the abuse, some of which is built into the economic model, and whether we're big enough to do what this remarkable woman did. Why does Malala Yousafzai appear on the front cover of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world? Is it not the direct suggestion that this 15-year-old girl who began her campaign of advocacy at the age of 11, and in fact, if you read the small piece in here, it's written by Chelsea Clinton, describes courage, that she is a symbol of courage and conviction. What was it that she made her lifetime's business from 11? The right of women and girls to be educated. We think that's not a big deal because we have it. From the business schools to the universities to the standards education that we so easily appreciate. But I believe that we are at an interesting paradox in our complex Western world at the moment. We have diversity campaigns for minorities of ethnic communities, for people of different sexual orientations, and for women, all of which are legitimate and must continue. But the excessive energy devoted to the progression of those who already enjoy privilege is out of kilter with a broken world. And my argument would be that in the balance of the purposefulness that we seek, we should be at the center of building a new civil society activism, which is not just about irritable protest, but is also about the advancement of basic rights. Wendy referred to the Mobiles for Good Summit, so I get one of my mobiles out, and here, if I may refer to an email received this morning. I am a trustee of the Vodafone Global Foundation. Vodafone, for those of you from another country called the United States, never heard of it myself, but well, I do know. Half my family live in the USA. That Vodafone owns 49% of Verizon, and there is a battle on between whether Verizon or Vodafone will eventually eat one another up. I can tell you I know the answer to that, and it begins with V. And so you need to think about that. But here is an email that arrived this morning from the director of our foundation, Andrew Dunnett, who sends information around to the trustees. Last Thursday, he said, was the world's first fistula day. Do I need to explain what obstetric fistula is? Yes. I do? Yes. I do? Yes. Oh, right. Okay, obstetric fistula is a condition that only affects women. It is a condition brought about largely because of too many early childbirths, or a combination of too many early childbirths and rape. And it debilitates a woman's capacity to contain and control her bladder functions. She effectively then becomes incontinent at a very young age. Large numbers of women in very poor communities, particularly in southern Africa, opt out of any form of civil life, education, or working opportunity simply because they cannot control their bodily functions. They then become essentially a new form of untouchables. Vodafone identified in Tanzania that there were 28,000 women who had responded to a mobile campaign identifying themselves with the condition of obstetric fistula. We began a program last year to notice not only how many women there were, but to raise the resources to allow women to obtain the operation of correction. It can be corrected. The operation takes only a matter of about an hour and a half. Vodafone provides the support on the mobile phone that allows women to get the bus fare to get to the hospital for operation. It provides the connection that allows women to register themselves for the operation and the continuing progressive further care. So last Thursday was the first World Fistula Day. Vodacom and Vodafone Foundation organized a bus tour throughout Tanzania of women who've been treated for fistula, promoting positive health messages about the condition and its cure. It prompted huge press interest in Tanzania. The Guardian ran a piece here in the UK. The UK High Commissioner gave a speech at an event hosted in the construction site of the new maternity hospital in Dar es Salaam, praising the work of Vodacom and Vodafone Foundation. The bus tour and the bulk SMS campaign has trebled the numbers of calls of women to the hotline asking for help. In another development yesterday, after 18 months of requests and meetings, we received our first legal document from USAID setting out the terms of our agreement, confirming that Vodafone has raised $20 million towards this campaign in the last year. Interestingly, USAID have also announced a further $70 million available for fistula campaigns in sub-Saharan Africa, which provide us with an opportunity to consider seriously a scale-up of the campaign in the DRC, Lesotho, Mozambique, and in Kenya. Finally, Michelle Obama looks likely to host a summit for African First Ladies at the hospital site in Tanzania when the president visits in late June. We have a choice as Vodafone, or I say in my role here as BT. The choice is to campaign just for the progression of women in their own right, or to take on the tough headache that those who have no human rights as women, to give them the starter block of the beginning of basic dignity. I want to see the energy you possess moving in that direction. In the same way as I repeatedly and continuously say to the black communities of Britain, to the black communities of North America, and to the black communities wherever they feel disadvantaged, do as Martin Luther King did. Stop focusing on your color. Focus on your character. Because it's only the redefinition of character that will give us any sense of ultimate purpose. Thank you.